This is Fortress on a Hill with Henry, Danny, Keagan, Jovanni, Shiloh, Manisha, and Mike.
Welcome back to another episode of Fortress on a Hill, a podcast about U.S. foreign policy, anti-imperialism, skepticism, and the American way of war. I'm Jovanni, your host. I'm here with Keagan. Keagan, how you doing today?
How are you?
I am doing well. Trying to come back to recording after a long time.
It's been a long time since we've done anything.
At one point, we'll record at least once a week. I know there's a lot of things going on in people's lives, things happening in the world. It's so rapid, not only in the world, but also, domestically, internationally. Everything just happens so fast. Right now, we're 9 months into the Trump era. It seems like an eternity. It seems like we've been here for a long time. Like we're in quicksand here. We're just moving and nothing is happening. The more we move, the more we sink.
I feel like I have to laugh to not cry these days.
We've only been 9 months, right?
Yeah, it's been 9 months, but it feels like forever.
So anyway, I wanted us to come on. We've been following this for the last 2 years, the genocide, the Holocaust in Gaza. And we've all been frustrated by the old contradictions, the lack of states not doing anything as this Holocaust continued, and pretty much seeing how everything plays out, including when international bodies like the ICCs and ICJs condemn and issue arrest warrants to the people conducting this genocide. The Israeli high office people tend to travel like it was nothing. They brush it off like it was nothing. We've seen how international law is being crumbled. And not only that, is how all these Western states bend over backwards to show their support to the Zionist state of Israel and pretty much trample all over international laws and human rights laws, Geneva Conventions, everything, all of these institutions that they themselves have been created, they themselves have been pushing onto everyone, but they themselves have been intervening in other countries for the past 20-something years, 30 years, 40 years, in the name of upholding the rule of law and everything. But when it comes to Israel, it seems like they can act with impunity. They're above the law. The law does not apply to them. It applies to everybody else, particularly in the global south, but not to them.
We just saw over the last 30 years, we created these ways of making war where we could stay there forever and not have to do anything other than just continue to grind the people down over and over again. And now that war is coming home. It's being waged abroad still, but it's coming home. I'm really sad about everything that's been taking place over the last 2 years. It makes me really sad that the governments of the world have not stepped up in any meaningful way to really help the people. It's all been grassroots-led movements trying to do something. We just had 2 Portlanders or Oregonians come in last night from the flotilla, which is really cool. I hope that this peace plan at least leads to something that means something, that it's at least a good starting point to make sure that we can have an end to this war. But I don't know if that's actually going to happen.
I was reading today that it's similar to the peace plan with Hezbollah, where since last year was supposed to be enacted, was supposed to be a ceasefire between Hezbollah and the IOF, right? It's been a one-sided ceasefire because Israel hasn't stopped bombing Lebanon.
Nobody's acknowledged how many times they bombed Syria. I almost forgot that they've bombed the crap out of Syria multiple times.
They were
What?
We're doing on a weekly basis. They were bombing Syria for the last 10 years, and they've been continuing bombing now. Yeah.
But still, they occupied a bunch of southern Syria, basically up to Damascus. And
they got more territory than they occupy in Gaza.
Yes.
More territory in Syria than the size of Gaza.
Yeah. We're in a really interesting moment in time, but it's nice to see that Israel's becoming a global pariah. If not, they already are. And more people are willing to step up and say, hey, we don't agree with what you're doing here. But it sucks that it's taken this long. It sucks that it's taken us 2 years to get to this point where the governments are finally like, maybe we need to do something about this. Have you heard the Irish president's idea?
What is that?
His idea, which is shared by some other people, is the idea of the General Assembly of the UN can go around a security veto if they have a 2/3 majority in the assembly. they could create an armed force of people to go in and be peacekeepers from countries around the world. They override the security veto because it's a 2/3 vote in the General Assembly.
Now, similar to what the Colombian president said at the UN as well. He was calling for international force to intervene in Israel and in Palestine to stop the genocide. The Security Council is pretty much being held hostage by the United States. The Security Council has 5 permanent states, which is France, UK, United States, China, and Russia. One veto can be a showstopper for everything. And every time Israel comes up, the United States exercises veto power and it becomes a showstopper.
That's why I like this idea. It's a way to get around it. At least maybe.
Yeah. Going back to what you were saying about states not doing anything in a meaningful way, if you recall when the assault started, right? As soon as October 7th started, the Israeli response to October 7th, which happened, I think, 2 days later, the United States moved in military assets to the sea, sent in aircraft carriers, and pretty much sent a group, right? The Navy,
Strike group.
a strike group, call a strike group into the sea, into the area. Pretty much what it was a threat for no country to intervene and what's about to happen. It was mostly a threat to Iran and Iraq, any other country that could intervene or possess any significant restraint on Israel, including his own allies, including Egypt. Egypt has the largest Arab army in the region. That threat was also meant for them as well, to allow Israel to act with impunity. Going back about states not doing anything, the only state that actively has done something, has been upholding the Convention Against Genocide of 1948, which states that in all states, it's the duty of all states to prevent genocide. In the course of a genocide happening, it's the duty of all states to intervene, to stop it. The only state that has done so in a meaningful and direct way has been Yemen, and they've paid for it. They've been bombed, well, upholding international law. Going back to the Convention Against Genocide of 1948, Iran has assisted indirectly by supplying weapons, and also Syria was intervening indirectly by being of weapons to reach fighters, resistant fighters. And they were part of what are called of resistance. And you saw what happened with Iran, for example. They did a strike, a surprise attack on Iran. While they were doing negotiation with the United States, Israel did a surprise attack. They tried to do a decapitation, take out the leadership of Iran. They conducted a dirty war against Syria and overthrew the Assad government in Syria and put in a former Al-Qaeda commander, July, as the president of Syria, who wants to bend over backwards to appease Israel and the United States.
I think that it'll be interesting to see what happens with Yemen in the future now that things are de-escalating, or hopefully de-escalating. They've been in such a precarious situation for so long with their civil war and everything that has happened to them for the last 30 years.
Yeah. Right before this was happening, they were being attacked by a Saudi-led coalition. They were using hunger as a weapon. It's like Israel's using hunger as a weapon against Gazans. They were using hunger as a weapon against the Yemenis.
Yeah, that war started in 2015. That was not a good time.
Let's look at these. Yeah, let's look at this plan real quick. I'll read them out loud and you tell me your thoughts. I got 2 documents open. I got one from the BBC and I got one from Al Jazeera. Which one you want to read?
I have the BBC one open.
Okay, let's look at the BBC one. This was published 1 day ago. It says, U.S. President Donald Trump says Israel and Hamas have signed off on the first phase of his 20-point Gaza peace plan in a major step towards a permanent end to 2 years of war. He unveiled the plan at the White House on 29 September alongside Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Israel accepted terms, right? There was no Palestinian president when this was unveiled. On 3 October, Hamas said it agreed to return all 48 remaining hostages, quote-unquote hostages, being held in Gaza in exchange for Palestinian prisoners in Israeli jails and Gaza detainees, and to the idea of handing over the governance of Gaza to Palestinian technocrats. People don't know that there are thousands of Palestinians lingering in Israeli jails.
Yeah.
Even before October 7th, there were thousands there. There were even small children that get picked up and taken into these detention centers. They call them administrative detention. There are thousands of them. But the group did not mention other elements, most notably the requirement that it disarm. Once the ceasefire takes effect, U.S., Qatari, Egyptian, and Turkish mediators will attempt to get both sides to agree what Trump called a strong, durable, and everlasting peace. Here is the full text of the president's plan as provided by the White House, right? Number one, Gaza will be de-radicalized, terror-free zone that does not pose a threat to its neighbors. That's the first one. Thoughts?
Right away, they're saying we're not going to have any fighting or any armed resistance whatsoever.
Yeah. When they use the term de-radicalized terror-free zone, which according to international law, the Palestinians have a right to liberate themselves by any means accessible to them, right? Which include armed conflict. Doesn't grind in international law, doesn't grind in the UN Charter, right? They have the right to free themselves from oppression. They have a right to free themselves from an alien occupying force by any means available to them, including armed resistance, right? My take is that de-radicalized terror-free zone is pretty much criminalizing right of resistance and self-determination.
Right.
Gaza will be redeployed for the benefits of the people who have suffered more than enough.
Redeveloped for the benefit of the people of Gaza.
One thing, didn't like Trump, planned last year of making Gaza like some type of French Riviera with casinos and whatnot.
That's what he's saying.
At the same time, moving the populace.
Egypt and Jordan.
Huh?
Egypt and Jordan.
Number three, if both sides agree to this proposal, the war will immediately end. Israeli forces will withdraw to agreed upon line to prepare for a hostage release. During this time, all military operations, including bombardment, will be suspended and battle lines will remain frozen until conditions are met for the complete stage withdrawal.
This is the part I was running into issues with when I was reading and seeing how they're saying there's going to be some staged withdrawal, but they never outline what those stages are. And there's no timeline for them to be completed. So Netanyahu can basically be like, there's no timeline, so gotta start bombing again.
Yeah. You saw that map as a yellow line, red line, blue line.
I saw that. But there's no timeline for when those second stages are going to happen. Second and third stages.
The onus of this peace plan is put upon the resistance coalition in Gaza and elsewhere. I say resistance coalition. They keep saying Hamas. Hamas is not the only faction that is fighting. There's a coalition of different factions that came under the umbrella. They call themselves the Resistance Committee or something like that. Hamas is the largest entity of them all, and they're leading. But there is a coalition of different resistance sectors, and more were created because of this war. Neighborhood brigades were created while this war was going on. But you're right. There's no timeline. There's no pressure on Israel whatsoever to do anything. Pretty much what Israel could not achieve on the ground, because Israel on the ground could not defeat the Hamas coalition. The battles were never clear winnings by the Israeli forces. I've been tracking it. A good source to track the battle field was John Elmer he'll give his analysis and show the videos of what's happening on the ground. The battlefront, Israel hasn't been successful. The goal 2 years ago was to destroy Hamas and all the infrastructure and militarize the whole zone, which 2 years into the game, they haven't been able to do. Keep in mind that Gaza is about a strip about 10-mile long and 5-mile wide. And the entire Israeli force, IDF, which had to do recruitment, they even call in people, the Hazara Jews, that don't serve in the military. They took out their privilege of not serving the military. They had to do a draft to get people in because the whole mighty Israeli army could not defeat ragtag guerrilla forces on the ground. And they had Marketa tanks, which is supposed to be the undefeated tank. It was supposed to be a wonder weapon, and they were just getting destroyed left and right.
All the videos.
So I've been in the tank. I've been in the M1. When I was in the Army, I was in a tank battalion. I was a medic with the Abraham M1 tanks. With the first Gulf War, they were considered invincible. They participated in the first Gulf War. The only losses of the Abraham M1 was due to friendly fires, pretty much, right? Because the tanks that the Iraqis had couldn't penetrate them. But when the invasion and occupation of Iraq happened, the insurgents were just blowing them up. And a similar thing was happening here. Merkava, the Merkava tank is supposed to be like this. It's a heavier tank than the M1 tank, more invulnerable. They were being destroyed. I was watching a video today, an Israeli fighter placed a bomb in the turret and just blew it up and carried it to beneath the turret and it just blew it up. So we're getting destroyed, right? On the ground, they haven't been successful. They've been trying to win politically. I think this is what we're seeing right now, trying to win politically, not on their own device either. They rely on the United States to kind of do it on their own.
Yeah.
Where are we at?
4.
We're number 4?
Yeah.
Within 72 hours of Israeli publicly accepting this agreement, all hostages alive will be returned.
Straightforward.
A lot of those captives that the Palestinians had were killed by Israel.
Yeah.
Through
In the strikes. Or
Once all hostages are released, Israel will release 250 life sentence prisoners plus 1,700 were detained after 7 October 2023, including all children detained in that context. For every Israeli hostage whose remains are released, Israel will release the remains of 15 deceased.
I like that. People getting released is always a good thing.
The thing I can take is that they're not talking about releasing any of the thousands of people before October 7th.
What about them?
I read today that they have the bodies of the Qassam Brigade commander, Sinwar, and they're not releasing his body either. And there's also a prisoner. He's been in prisons for, I think it's the 80s. And he's very popular among Palestinians. He's considered the person who can lead and organize and bring together all the Palestinian factions. And the Israelis are not releasing him either. So, yeah. Okay. Where are we at? 6?
Yeah.
Once all hostages are returned, Hamas members who commit to peaceful coexistence and decommission their weapons will be given amnesty. Members of Hamas who wish to leave Gaza will be provided safe passage to receiving countries.
I'm concerned that, they give their weapons, they get amnesty. But where do they go? What do they do with themselves? What happens to their family members?
And also, how will Palestinians benefit by disarming themselves when they still have to live under the hostility of Israel? They're still vulnerable to Israeli violence.
Many people would be willing to give up when there's no right to safety.
Exactly. And given that Israel can act with impunity and no one will hold them accountable, what guarantee are you giving?
Yeah.
That the coalition that is ruling Israel right now, which is led by Benjamin Netanyahu, they flat out say that there will be no Palestinian state.
You have that unholy alliance he made with Smotrich and Ben Gvir, the extreme right wing of his party, to now that's the only reason his government is afloat. And he's just desperately trying to hang on to power at this point.
Yep.
That's what scares me about this whole thing.
Upon acceptance of this agreement, full aid will be immediately sent into Gaza Strip. Quantities will be consistent with what was included in a 19 January 2025 agreement regarding humanitarian aid, including rehabilitation of infrastructure, water, electricity, sewage, rehabilitation of hospitals and bakeries, and entry of necessary equipment to remove rubble and open roads.
That's pretty good. I don't know what that agreement was.
Either.
If they can make it happen. I know it's going to cost them like 55 years to rebuild everything.
But I know that agreement, every other agreement before that, that's one of the conditions that Israeli resistance has always made, the release of aid. The context here is, what the underlying context here is, why isn't aid entering in the first place where, where they're supposed to? Remember, we had the nurse that came on, talked to us, and she's been working, Anna, name was, right? She's been working on the ground in Gaza. Before that, she was working in combat zones in other places. She worked in Iraq and Ukraine. What's unique about this combat zone is that in other places, Ukraine and Iraq, they were able to deliver aid unrestricted. But here, from jump, Israeli control what enters and comes out of Gaza. They're not supposed to use aid as a weapon. That's part of the laws of war. You're not supposed to do collective punishment. You're not supposed to punish a whole population, use hunger as a weapon to bring your enemy to submission.
War crimes.
And that's what jumps out to me. Why wasn't aid able to go in? And then the organization that was in charge of providing aid, UNRWA, which is a UN institution, They were sent packing. They were sent, and Israeli called them terrorist sympathizers for doing their
Yeah.
job. You remember that?
Yeah.
Entry of distribution of aid in the Gaza Strip will proceed without interference from the two parties through the United Nations and its agency, and the Red Crescent, in addition to other international institutions not associated with either party. The Rafah crossing in both directions will be subject to the same mechanism implemented under 19 January 2025.
That's interesting because you were just bringing up UNRWA, and it's like they're going to let the UN come in, but not UNRWA. So who is it going to be?
That organization that was created with a bunch of contractors and whatnot, remember?
The Gaza Humanitarian Foundation?
Yeah.
The ones who are providing aid right now?
They're corralling people like cows.
Creating these quote unquote safety corridors.
Gaza will be governed under the temporary transitional governments of a technocrat, apolitical Palestinian committee responsible for delivering the day-to-day running of public service and municipalities for the people of Gaza. This committee will be made up of qualified Palestinians and international experts with oversight and supervision by a new international transitional body. The Board of Peace, which will be headed and chaired by President Donald J. Trump. This body will set the framework and handle the funding for the redevelopment of Gaza until such time as the Palestinian Authority has completed its reform program, as outlined in various proposals, including President Trump's peace plan in 2020 and a Saudi-French proposal, and can securely and effectively take back control of Gaza. This body will call on best international standards to create modern and efficient governance that serves the people of Gaza and is conducted to attract an investment.
Oh, technocratic apolitical Palestinian committee. What does that even mean? What Palestinian technocrats are there? I'm sure there's probably some, but what do they mean? There's so many words that are just so up for interpretation.
The board be headed by President Donald J. Trump and former Prime Minister Tony Blair, right?
The guy who helped give us Iraq.
So this reconstruction is going to take years, right?
Yeah.
And here Trump assigns himself as the head of the Board of Peace. So is this transactional? So he'll be the he'll be the executive office of the United States, the president of the United States, at the same time a board of peace of an international body. So what happens if after 3 years of the next election, they say we have a new president? Is he still going to be part of the board or what?
Yeah.
And they have this Palestinian Authority. One of the things that discredited them after the Oslo Accord was the fact that they did agree to arm. They agreed to disarm pretty much in the West Bank. So that's why the Israelis have had their way in the West Bank, because the Palestinians in the West Bank are largely disarmed. Those images that you see of people throwing rocks and sling rocks and stuff like that at Palestinian Israeli tanks, because they were largely disarmed after the Oslo Agreement. And pretty much allowed Israel to continue putting settlements, bulldozing people's homes, moving more settlers. They didn't do nothing for them. And all this under the watchful eyes of the Palestinian authorities. So they were largely discredited because of that. Then they became financed by the United States, this PA authority. And what they did, they ended up just being Israel's police force to police Palestinians. That's pretty much what they became after the agreement, to police Palestinians in the West Bank. And they are armed, they're lightly armed, and they use their arms against Palestinians, not Israelis.
And where have they been for the last 2 years? Where's their voice? They haven't said anything.
They condemn Hamas.
Ugh.
Yeah, so these bodies largely discredited. They're not trusted by the Palestinian people. They're not liked by the Palestinian people. They lost the election against Hamas in 2005, 2006, overwhelmingly lost to Hamas.
Yeah.
So they're not popular at all. And Israel want them to further reform. So I don't know what more reform they want. But they're the ones who are recognized by the United Nations as the voice of the Palestinian people, or the leadership of the Palestinian people. Mahmoud Hamas. Or is it Mahmoud Abbas? That's his name.
Yeah.
President of the Palestinian Authority, which, by the way, he has overstated his term also. He got elected the first time.
Arafat was killed?
After Arafat stepped down, because if you recall, that Bush Jr., He was calling for elections for a Palestinian state. One of the conditions that George Bush placed on the Palestinian people that they have to have elections. But Arafat couldn't run. So they had election. That's how Abbas came in. I was back in the early 2000s. But since then, they haven't had any other elections for president of the PA. They just kept this guy on. And he's been a good shield for the Israelis and Americans. Technically, he's like the recognized authority of the Palestinian people. But yeah, he's overstated his term already, and they just keep him there. And he's ineffective, pretty much.
They deserve better.
All right, let's go number 10. Let's pick that up. A Trump economic development plan to rebuild and energize Gaza will be created by convening a panel of experts who have helped birth some of the thriving modern miracle cities in the Middle East. Thoughtful investment proposals and developments by well-meaning international groups will be considered to synthesize the security and governance frameworks to attract these investments that will create jobs, opportunity, and hope for the future of Gaza.
Man, I'm scared whenever I see Trump economic development plan because his economic plans are never any good for regular people. That is what scares me. And we've already seen it. They want to turn it into a modern technical city with everything fancy stuff that Singapore has. But what's the cost for the regular people?
Yeah, it seems to me like they want to turn it like we have in the United States. We have those casinos, indigenous land, and the indigenous people on the reservations. But these casinos are owned by big capital. I think that's the vision they have for Gaza, just being this, like you said, Riviera, a casino place where people are just employees of the big privatized companies that will go in there to make it into a entertainment district.
Scary.
Keep in mind, off the coast of Gaza, there's said to be deposits of oil as well.
Oh,
And,
more things for them to steal.
yeah, they want to do a corridor, like a train corridor that comes out through Gaza as well to offset the Suez Canal. Right now, the Suez Canal is the only thing that links the Mediterranean to the Red Sea, off to the Indian Ocean. If not, Europeans will have to go all the way around Africa to get to the Indian Ocean, but it's still the Suez Canal. One of the things they want to do is the IMAC corridor, I think it's called. But they want to cut through and create another route to the sea.
Oh, yeah, I read about that.
All right. A special economic zone will be established with preferred tariff and access rates to be negotiated with participating countries. That to me reads as privatization and corporations taking over.
Tariff and access rates. Nice. So there'll be special rates for people.
No one will be forced to leave Gaza, and those who wish to leave will be free to do so and free to return. We will encourage people to stay and offer them the opportunity to build a better day.
I hope that's
interesting, given that a lot of Palestinians are not allowed to go back. Particularly, that's the whole movement about the right to return. The ones that left after 1948, they're not allowed to come back. So it's a lot of refugee camps surrounding, like in Jordan, Syria, and Lebanon, and they're not allowed to come back into Palestine. All military, terror, and offensive infrastructure, including tunnels and weapons production facilities, will be destroyed and not rebuilt. There will be a process of demilitarization under the supervision of independent monitors, which will include placing weapons permanently beyond use through an agreed process of decommissioning and supported by internationally funded reintegration program, all verified by the independent monitors. New Gaza will be fully committed to building a prosperous economy and to peaceful living.
this is a big contentious point with Hamas.
Exactly. The only neighbor that can coexist with are people who are occupying them, pressing them, and bombing them. They don't have any issue with anybody else in the region.
Exactly.
A long time ago, I remember Norm talking about that their vision of a Palestinian state is what they call a Bantu state, which is what South Africa had before they ended apartheid, which was like little internal states. It's supposed to be autonomous states in South Africa, but they're really controlled by the South African government. Pretty much what we have here with reservation.
Yeah.
It's supposed to be nations and autonomous, but they're really controlled by the federal government. I think that's the vision that they have for this quote unquote Palestinian state. A total disarmed Palestinian state at the mercy of Israel. Israel can do whatever it wants to them.
There's no mention of who's going to be the security for them. So they're just supposed to pretend like everyone's going to be cool with them.
Yeah, that's their vision. The vision is that a new Gaza fully committed to building a prosperous economy, peaceful coexistence with their neighbors. Before October 7, Gaza was under siege for close to 20 years by Israel. The Israelis will brag that they count the calories that go into Gaza. And occasionally they what they call mowing the grass. Occasionally they're bombing on Gaza because they had to cut the grass. That's prior October 7. So yeah. And then keep in mind the West Bank is militarized. The West Bank is unarmed. What's been happening in the West Bank, the continuous bulldozing people's homes and taking
Settlements expansion.
more expansion, taking more and more people's land. So who in their right mind can take the word of Israel seriously, or the word of the United States? Keep in mind that the Native Americans here in the United States lost their country one treaty at a time. They lost their country. They lost their land. A guarantee will be 14. A guarantee will be provided by regional partners to ensure Hamas and the factions comply with their obligation and that the new Gaza possesses no threat to its neighbors or its people. Again, the only entity threatened by Gaza is Israel.
No security. No one's going to take care of them. The guarantee is going to provide that they will comply, but there's no other side where they would be able to help them.
The United States will work with international partners to develop a temporary international stabilization force to immediately deployed in Gaza. The ISF will train and provide support to vetted Palestinian police forces in Gaza and will consult Jordan and Egypt, who have extensive experience in the fields. This force will be the long-term internal security solution. The ISF will work with Israel and Egypt to help secure border areas along with newly trained Palestinian police forces. It is critical to prevent munitions from entering Gaza and to facilitate the rapid and secure flow of goods to rebuild and revitalize Gaza. A deconfliction mechanism will be agreed upon by the parties.
Okay, we're talking about security now. Lightly armed police forces in the West Bank, so it'll probably be similar.
This is international, right?
Yeah.
There's no completion date. It says temporary international stabilization force, but there's no completion date. And who's going to be in these forces? You know, this reminds me of Bosnia and Kosovo because when I deployed to Bosnia, we deployed with the International Stabilization Force, and it's supposed to be temporarily. To this day, and I deployed back in '95, they still have an International Stabilization Force in Kosovo. I think KFOR, a Kosovo Force it was called. And to this day, Kosovo is pretty much a NATO base right now. So that's what temporary remind me of. Temporary is forever. They have an international force in the Sinai after the 1979 war to supposedly keep peace and everything. They've been there ever since.
Yeah.
Ever since this war, Israel did cross over and bomb Egypt and killed Egyptian soldiers, and that international force didn't do anything. After the 2006 war in Lebanon, you had the international force in southern Lebanon, and that was part of the peace treaty after the war between Hezbollah and Israel. When Israel tried to invade Lebanon this time around, they didn't do anything. They were attacked. They were bombed too, and nothing happened. This temporary international stabilization force does not inspire confidence in me.
Yeah.
We're getting better security.
Lightly armed cops with an international force that'll stay there forever.
Israel will not occupy or annex Gaza. As the ISAF establishes control and stability, the IDF will withdraw based on standards, milestones, and timeframes linked to demilitarization that will be agreed upon between the IDF, ISF, the guarantors, and the United States, with the objective of a secure Gaza that no longer poses a threat to Israel, Egypt, or its citizens. Practically, the IDF will progressively hand over the Gaza territory to the ISF according to an agreement that will make the transitional authority until they are withdrawn completely from Gaza, save the security perimeter that will remain until Gaza is properly secured from any resurgent terror threat.
Yeah, another mouthful, but the first sentence is important. If they want to abide by the agreement, Israel has to follow this. I'm going to be paying really close attention to these time frames that they're going to be establishing because that's the most important thing in my mind. When are you going to start creating these time frames to withdraw?
They haven't mentioned time frames.
No.
And that the first sentence that says Israel will not occupy or annex Gaza, they were not supposed to occupy and annex no territory after 1967. Yet they still do. And that's the first time also I heard that a Gaza threat to Egypt.
Yeah, that seems a stretch.
Egyptian protesters, when they were doing this last 2 years, they were discouraged from protesting. People would come out to the street, they were getting beat back down, not to come out on the street and protest in favor of Gaza. So I don't think the citizens are worried about Gazans.
Definitely not.
All right, 17, we're almost done. In the event Hamas delays or rejects this proposal, the above, including the scaled up operation, will proceed. So what they're saying here, that they'll continue bringing aid regardless if Hamas delays or reject the proposals.
I think they're saying in those specific areas instead of across the whole strip. Interesting.
An interfaith dialogue will be established based on the values of tolerance and peaceful coexistence to change mindsets and narratives of Palestinians and Israelis by emphasizing the benefits derived from peace.
This is ambitious.
I think it's done deliberately. Roughly about 30% of Palestinians are Christians, right?
Yeah.
Some of the infrastructure that was hit by Israel were Christian churches, which doesn't always make the narrative because, as you heard Benjamin Netanyahu recently say, that they want to keep the American Christian evangelical on board to support Israel and whatnot. So bringing up that a lot of people are being targeted by Israel, also Christians as well, does not go well for their narrative because they want all Palestinians to be quote unquote radical Islamists. That's the go-to narrative that they want to go to. The fighters that are on the ground, the FLPT, what called the Democratic Front for Liberation of Palestine, Palestinian Liberation Front, they are socialist organizations, Marxist organizations, and a lot of them are not confessional to any religious. But that also get left out of the narrative as well.
Yeah.
And they're also Christian militias. We saw Christian militias as well fighting off the Israelis, and that doesn't make the narrative here in the West because it doesn't go well with the box that they're trying to make that all these people are radical Islamists, and that's not the fact.
We still need to pull away from this idea that there's this big war of the West versus Islam. There's still so many people that think that because they think that Islam is somehow incompatible with Western values. And it's if you actually talk to Muslims, you'll know that's not the case. Most of them have never talked to anybody from that area, so they just have their misconceptions.
It seems like it's deliberately done because if you look two states that were multi-confessional and they were secular, Iraq and Syria, they were destroyed. They were destroyed and broken up and made to be sectarian, whereas before Iraq wasn't sectarian, it was multi-confessional. Saddam came from a Sunni family, but his vice president was a Christian, Tariq. He was made to be sectarian, just like Syria. Syria was multi-confessional. The president came from an Alawite background, but the majority of the Syrian Arab army was Sunnis, and there were also Christians and there were also Druze in the military as well. And religion wasn't the main factor in the way that state functioned. Whereas now, by supporting ISIS and Al-Qaeda and taking over the Syrian state, now it became sectarian. And now it fits in that box, that conservative box, America versus Islamic world. It was made to be that way. Before it wasn't. Yeah, but you're right. I do have conversation with people who are conservative minded, and they seem to believe that Islam is coming to get us. It's like this big boogeyman.
If you spoke to Muslims, you would know that fighting is haram. Fighting is against their religion, and the fighters that do it are not representative of Islam.
That's where the term takfiri came from. That's
Yeah.
what Allah called the ISIS and Al-Qaeda that were going against the teachings of Islam. They call it takfiri fighters. And for those who don't know, Nasrallah was the Hezbollah leader that was killed last year with the Israel bombardment of about, I think it was 80 bunker busters that pretty much leveled the whole square, killing like over 2,000 people just to get one person.
Wow, I did not know it was that many.
Yeah, they level a whole square with about 80 bunker busters, bombs and whatnot.
Holy shit.
I gotta go back and it was 2000. There was a lot of people just to get one person. All right, where
Just,
were we at?
just out 19.
19. Gaza redevelopment advances, and when the PA reform program is faithfully carried out, the conditions may finally be in place for a credible pathway to Palestinian self-determination and statehood, which we recognize as the aspiration of the Palestinian people.
That sounds good.
But they haven't mentioned what reform the PA has to do. Up to now, the PA has been faithfully following whatever Washington tells them to do.
Exactly.
So what more reform they need? It doesn't give a time frame for Palestinian statehood either. They've been like, if everything is perfect, if all the T's are crossed and all the I's are dotted, maybe we'll think about a Palestinian state. That's what it reads to me.
Yeah.
They're not guaranteeing a Palestinian state.
It's saying as we do all these things, the conditions may be in place for a credible pathway. Who determines what that may is? Who determines what those conditions mean when they're met?
And keep in mind that most countries have recognized the Palestinian state.
Yeah.
Remember in the meeting that they did, a lot of European states recognized Palestine as a state, including the UK.
France, Canada, UK.
Yeah.
Crazy.
So most countries around the world recognize Palestine as a state. Keep in mind that Kosovo, for example, became a state. Serbia does not accept a state. And neither does Spain. Spain does not see Kosovo as a state. Neither does Russia. Why? Because the United States considers it a state. Serbia have never given up Kosovo. Kosovo was a province of Serbia. They never accepted Kosovo as a state, and yet they're a state. The United States will establish a dialogue between Israel and the Palestinians to agree on a political horizon for peaceful and prosperous. It just sounds beautiful.
It sounds nice. The reality is, and I think this is something that people in America don't really want to talk about that much, is the fact that when you look at the Israeli population and what they say to Arabs and how they think about Arabs and the Palestinians, they don't consider them people. And they have so much work to do. If they really want to get to a place where they feel like at peace, they have so much work to do to make their country into a more open and accepting place. I don't see that happening in any short amount of time.
Yeah, like I said, the onus of this is placed on the Palestinians.
Yeah.
It's not placed on the Israeli population, not placed on the Israeli leadership. Everything's placed on the shoulders of the Palestinians. The Palestinians need to reform, not the Israelis. The Palestinians need to conform. Not the Israeli, the Palestinians need to conform. The Palestinians need to comply. Not the Israeli, the Palestinians need to comply. Everything falls on the shoulder of the Palestinians. It's not a peace plan. It's an article of surrender. To me, that's how it reads to me. It's an article of surrender.
Yeah,
it's like how after World War II, in Japan, the United States pretty much wrote the Japanese Constitution. The peace treaty was American written. Japanese just had to sign. That's it. It was a surrender treaty. That's what this reads to me as surrender treaty.
There's not a lot of imposition on the Israelis. It's just accepted that they're on board with this and that they want to do everything they can to create peace as well. And we know that's just not the case. So,
what do you think about this peace plan, Keagan?
I think it sounds good, but there's a lot of problems with it. I wish there was more imposition on the Israelis to do something about it and make themselves better instead of putting everything on the Palestinians. But I'm happy that at least somebody's trying to do something. At the end of the day, it's better than nothing at this point because it's been so long and so many people have died. We need to have a solution. I'm glad that this is something that's at least being put forward. It's a good starting point.
You think last, think it'll hold?
I think that depends on Israel. That depends on how much they want to keep fighting. It depends on Netanyahu, how much he wants to stay in power, which we know he's doing everything he can to stay in power. That is what concerns me. He's going to wait until the hostages are released and then start bombing again. So that just blows this whole thing out of the water, but I hope that doesn't happen.
You think that the Palestinians will disarm?
I think you'd have some people that do, but I doubt most of them will because it's existential for them.
May I recall an Israeli ambassador to the UK for her name when she was interviewed in Sky News, and she flat out said that the Palestinian has to go. All of them have to go. Just leave a small amount of them in Israel for labor. With that attitude, can this work?
I don't see that working with these people in power that don't see them as people. They don't acknowledge their existence. So you have to have entirely new people that are at least willing to entertain the idea that Palestinians are people and we need to acknowledge them on a diplomatic basis.
Okay, I think it's a good place to wrap up for today. Thank you for jumping on the show. Any last words before we depart?
Everyone stay safe and fuck ICE and free Palestine.
Yeah, stay in the street. Just because peace 20 peace plan or whatever you want to call it, I call it a surrender deal. But just because this came forward and fighting seems to be winding down, it's not time for people to go home and
Yeah.
have brunch again. Keep an eye on the ball. Stay in the street. Stay putting pressure. Keep calling representatives. Whatever you do is at your disposal. The end game here is a free Palestine, a liberated Palestine. These people in Tel Aviv and Washington, they be held accountable and they face some type of accountability. Netanyahu has been cited by the ICC and ICJ for war crimes. He needs to be held accountable. It's not time to get your foot off the gas. Keep pushing.
Keep the pressure on.
All right. Thank you again. People get involved. Stay in the streets. Like us. Subscribe to our channels, our YouTube, Telegram. Look us up. Listen to us on the podcast. Please share with your friends. Help us grow. Stay tuned for our next episode. Hopefully, it's not going to take as long as this one. Take care.
Money is tight these days for everyone. Penny pinching to make it through the month often doesn't give people the funds to contribute to a creator they support. So we consider it the highest honor that folks help us fund the podcast in any dollar amount they're able. Patreons is the main place to do that. In addition, any support we receive makes sure we can continue to provide our main episodes free for everyone. And for supporters who can donate $10 a month or more, they will be listed right here as an honorary producer, like these fine folks. Fahim's Everyone Dream, Eric Phillips, Paul Appel, Julie Dupree, Thomas Benson, Janet Hansen, Ren Jacob, Scott Spalding, Spooky Tooth, and Helgeberg. However, if Patreon isn't your style, you can contribute directly through PayPal at paypal.me/Fortress on a Hill. Or please check out our store on Spreadshirt for some great Fortress merch. We're on Twitter and Facebook.com/Fortress on a Hill. You can find our full collection of episodes at www.fortressonahill.com. Skepticism is one's best armor. Never forget it. We'll see you next time.
Come on, you good people, listen to my song. I hope you'll pay attention. I will not take you long.
www